Balenciaga, the dark side of modern fashion. There's something strange happening in the fashion world and most people feel it, but don't understand it. Have you noticed that some brands don't sell clothes? They sell sensations? And that the darker the narrative, the stronger the fascination? It's almost as if we're living in a silent theater, where symbols speak louder than words, and few brands know how to use this dangerous language as well as Balenciaga. While many brands try to shine with predictable luxury, Balenciaga did the opposite. It delved into discomfort, provocation, the almost forbidden. And the most curious thing is that it worked. It worked so well that the whole world began to debate its impact, its intentions, and its shadows. Because let's face it, it's not normal for a luxury brand to create campaigns that seem to have been taken from a stylized nightmare and still become a global trend. But here's the most counterintuitive part. Maybe the problem isn't Balenciaga. Maybe the problem is us. We who consume the strange, who are drawn to dark narratives, who feel a chill and call it art. And most frighteningly, we keep looking. The more controversial, the more viral. The weirder, the more elegant it seems. As if luxury has discovered a way to manipulate the human mind using mystery. Therefore, before judging the brand, it's worth asking yourself, why does this dark side attract us so much? And more, what exactly is hidden behind this aesthetic that mixes genius with discomfort? The answer may be deeper than you imagine, and that's what we're going to explore now. The silent rise of a brand that never needed to shout. It's curious how some stories begin in a whisper, not with a bang. Balenciaga emerged precisely like that. Discreet, almost shy, but with a force that any attentive observer could feel in the air. Cristobal, that man who preferred silence to applause, seemed to understand that true power didn't need to be announced. He crafted each piece as if writing a secret destined for someone who knows how to decipher it. And, little by little, the world realized that there was something different there, something that couldn't be explained, only felt. Many people don't understand how a brand can grow without making a fuss, but the mentor observing the scene from afar perceives the hidden logic. When the content is truly extraordinary, the marketing happens on its own. Balenciaga gained strength because it delivered depth, not just aesthetics. It's the same principle a reader applies when choosing good books. You don't need an extravagant cover to recognize that the power of habit or mindset have real value. The brand did this with fabrics, cuts, and a quiet audacity that left critics disconcerted. And in that restrained beginning, there was also an interesting detail. Cristobal never wanted to be a celebrity, and perhaps that's why he became a myth. In an era where everyone wants to be seen, he became a giant precisely because he disappeared. This makes one think about how many times we seek recognition in the wrong place, when the true impact is born behind the scenes. And that same essence, the mystery, the anonymity, the almost dark intensity, is what would later become the shadow that accompanies the brand to this day, and which, curiously, prepares the ground for something far more unsettling in the next chapter. The cool aesthetic that has become a global signature. It's impressive how Balenciaga managed to transform cold weather into something desirable. While other brands sought glamour, shine, and excess, they opted for hard lines, sober tones, and an almost clinical feel. It was as if they were saying to the world, less emotion, more impact. And curiously, the public fell in love with this simplicity charged with tension. The brand created clothes that seemed to hold stories that no one dared to tell. This aesthetic didn't emerge by chance. When we analyze cultural movements, we realize that certain periods demand a specific type of visual language. At the height of technology and human distancing, Balenciaga offered clothing that reflected exactly that. A modern, almost futuristic coldness. It's the same principle that makes someone choose a minimalist smartphone or a house with industrial decor. Less embellishment, more hidden meaning. And this feeling of elegant distance ended up shaping a new standard in the market. For many, wearing Balenciaga has become a way of communicating quiet power. Not the traditional power, full of jewels and ostentation, but a cerebral, calculated, almost mathematical power. People seeking to convey authority adopted this visual language as one adopts a behavior. And of course, this highly controlled aesthetic would end up preparing the ground for something far more controversial. Because when a brand masters the cold, it also knows how to transform it into something even more uncomfortable. The shock, controversial campaigns that made headlines around the world. The turning point comes when Balenciaga stops being merely enigmatic and becomes unsettling. The campaigns that emerged in recent years carried elements that didn't fit the mold of traditional luxury. They were images that seemed to demand that the viewer take a deep breath before interpreting them. And the world, accustomed to aesthetic boldness, wasn't prepared to deal with such loaded symbolism. Suddenly, the cold turned into discomfort, and this ignited debates across the globe. Each new photograph seemed like an enigma to be deciphered. Some said it was just contemporary art, the kind that provokes, creates tension, and leaves questions unanswered. But others saw signs, metaphors, and references that went beyond the acceptable limit. It's the same feeling one has when reading a book like 1984. You realize there's something deeper there, and it stirs your instincts. Balenciaga understood this power and used it in a calculated way, perhaps too much so. And the effect was immediate. Headlines, criticism, theories, cancellations, and a desperate silence from the brand itself, as if it had created a monster it didn't know how to control. From that moment on, the public began to scrutinize every detail, suspecting hidden intentions and meanings. And, without realizing it, the brand opened a door it wouldn't be able to close anytime soon. A door that leads us directly to the most delicate debate of all. The fine line between art, provocation, and irresponsibility. When a powerful brand decides to provoke, it needs to understand that it's playing with fire. In the art world, there's an almost poetic freedom to question boundaries. But when Balenciaga crossed certain sensitive territories, the provocation stopped sounding like reflection and started sounding like recklessness. It's like that friend who makes a clever joke, but chooses the wrong moment, so out of place that nobody laughs, only feels the impact. Balenciaga realized this too late. The big issue here wasn't just aesthetics, but context. An image can be interpreted in 1,000 ways, but when it touches on sensitive subjects, the public reacts intensely, and rightly so. It's the same principle a good mentor teaches investors. It's not just about choosing the asset, it's about understanding the moment, the message, and the responsibility behind it. The brand intended to appear bold, but the world saw something completely different, something that crossed the line of what's acceptable. And this confusion between art and irresponsibility has generated a crisis of confidence that few brands manage to overcome. Because faced with so much symbolic tension, the public began to wonder, what is really behind all this? A question that, once it arises, doesn't go away. And it is precisely in this climate of distrust that interpretations, theories, and speculations emerge. Some absurd, others strangely plausible, that will lead us to an even more nebulous terrain. The impact on the luxury market and the silent fear of other brands. The most curious aspect of Balenciaga's crisis wasn't the immediate drop in sales, but the uncomfortable silence from other fashion houses. They observed everything from afar, like someone watching a neighboring building catch fire and hoping the flames don't reach their own balcony. In the luxury market, where every detail is worth millions, any slip-up becomes a lesson. And this time, the Lesson was grim. No one wanted to admit it publicly, but all the brands felt a strategic chill. Behind the scenes, silent meetings began to take place. Marketing directors reviewed campaigns, designers recalculated concepts, and CEOs requested risk assessments as if they were playing chess with their reputation. It's like when someone sees a friend make a major financial mistake. They immediately start reviewing their own investments, their own habits, and even their future choices. The fashion houses did exactly that. Total discretion, profound adjustments. And this silent fear revealed something that few people realize. Balenciaga acts as a cultural barometer. When it makes a mistake, the entire sector feels it. When it provokes, the market recalibrates. And when it falls, an uncomfortable question arises. What if we are all more vulnerable than we think? This unease hasn't disappeared. On the contrary, it has opened space for theories, hidden interests, and internal pressures to begin gaining unexpected strength on the world stage. What was really at stake? When a controversy explodes with such force, it's not just about a photo or a campaign. There's always something bigger hidden behind the scenes. In the case of Balenciaga, experts began to notice strange movements, rehearsed statements, and an excessively calculated silence. It was as if the brand was protecting more than just its image. It seemed to be shielding powerful corporate and creative interests. And, of course, when there's too much protection, the public senses that something valuable is being hidden. Within the fashion industry, internal pressures are as real as the catwalks. Creative directors live on the edge between genius and exhaustion. Legal departments scrutinize every detail, and shareholders expect results that don't always align with ethics or sensitivity. Imagine the pressure of launching collections that generate billions. It's almost like asking someone to run a marathon while holding crystals. One stumble is all it takes, and the entire system collapses. Balenciaga stumbled, and many people tried to hide the shards. It was in this tense environment that theories emerged, some exaggerated, others strangely plausible. Because when official answers don't satisfy, human beings seek meaning elsewhere. The public began to wonder who, in fact, had approved every detail of those campaigns, and why. Questions that remain hanging in the air to this day. And that lead us directly to the moment when the brand faced its greatest fall, not only commercially, but psychologically. Temporary decline and the brand's psychological manipulation of the audience. When the crisis reached its peak, Balenciaga did something few brands dare to do. It disappeared. No flashy campaigns, no grand shows, no convincing justifications. It was a silence so calculated it seemed like a chess move, the kind that confuses the viewer. It was as if the brand were saying, "Yes, we're in the eye of the storm, but we'll leave you to wonder what comes next." And this absence became an even stronger presence. The decline wasn't just financial, but emotional. People who previously defended the brand began to distance themselves, while critics intensified their opinions. Interestingly, this distancing created a kind of psychological tension in the public. It's the same feeling someone gets when reading a novel, and the author decides to include an entire chapter without answers. You get annoyed, but you can't put the book down. Balenciaga understood this effect and, in a way, used it almost manipulatively. With the strategic disappearance, the public began to interpret the silence as a sign of reformulation, regret, or even genius. And that's exactly where the game got dangerous. The brand transformed its own crisis into a narrative. It's as if it realized that, even in the shadows, interest hadn't died. It had only changed form. And this change would open the way for the most calculated and enigmatic return the fashion world has seen in recent years. The calculated return, the reconstruction of the Balenciaga narrative. When Balenciaga decided to return to the scene, it wasn't with visual explosions or its old provocative tone. It was a gentle, almost timid return, like someone knocking slowly before entering. The brand adjusted its aesthetics, reorganized its communication, and reshaped its discourse. It seemed less arrogant, more reflective. But anyone familiar with the luxury market knows, nothing there is truly innocent. Every gesture is strategically thought out. Internally, the rebranding functioned as an emotional reset. New campaigns emerged with more subtle messages, models in neutral environments, and safe compositions. The brand attempted to control the damage, rebuild trust, and at the same time maintain an air of exclusivity. It's similar to someone who makes a major public mistake and decides to return to their roots. They speak more, softly observe more, demonstrate humility, but without ever forgetting to maintain the charm that attracted the public from the beginning. And, at its core, this reconstruction of the narrative was less about apologies and more about elegant emotional manipulation. Balenciaga knew that humans have selective memories, and that, over time, curiosity overcomes indignation. Thus, little by little, the brand returned to the consumer's radar with the same dark intelligence that had always defined it. But now, its return raised an even deeper question. Why do we keep returning to what scares us? A grim lesson about the power of brands on the human mind. At this point, it becomes clear that Balenciaga doesn't just deal with fabrics, it deals with perceptions. Major brands understand something most people ignore. Human beings don't buy products, they buy meaning. And Balenciaga has always known how to manipulate this invisible element with frightening skill. It understood, like few others, that when you control the symbol, you also control desire. And that, in itself, reveals a disturbing truth about us. The psychology of luxury is built on a simple premise. The rarer something is, the more desirable it is. But Balenciaga elevated this logic to an emotional level. They realized that by mixing mystery with unease, they would create an irresistible combination for the subconscious. It's the same reason why so many people become obsessed with suspense films. Fear is as attractive as beauty. The brand used this emotional gray area as a tool, and this shaped generations of consumers who didn't even realize how much they were being influenced. And here's the most profound point. Luxury dictates not only what we wear, but also what we feel, how we perceive ourselves, and even how we evaluate others. Balenciaga has become a distorted mirror where the public sees its own shadows reflected. Because in the end, the fascination with dark brands reveals more about us than about them. And this reflection leads us directly to the final question, perhaps the most uncomfortable of the entire narrative. Final reflection. Why do we remain fascinated by the dark side of luxury? There's something almost hypnotic about the dark side of luxury, something that captivates us even when we say we don't want to look. Perhaps because human beings have a natural curiosity for that which defies rules, provokes discomfort, and suggests mystery. Balenciaga understood this emotional gap and transformed the strange into language. And the most intriguing thing is that even those who criticize observe. Even those who distance themselves follow. The forbidden has always had its own appeal. When we look at luxury, we see more than beauty. We see power, narrative, fantasy. And, in many cases, we also see what we would like to be. Freer, bolder, more intense. The dark side of these brands activates an ancient instinct. The desire to understand what deviates from the norm. It's like watching a documentary about real crimes. You know it's disturbing, but you keep watching because you want to understand the human mechanism behind it all. Dark luxury operates on the same frequency. And perhaps the most honest point of this reflection is realizing that, deep down, what attracts us is not the brand, but the feeling of touching a world that seems forbidden. A world that mixes fear with admiration. A world that exposes our internal contradictions. And without realizing it, we wait for the next move, the next revelation, the next provocation, as if we were trapped in a story that is not yet over, and that may become even more intriguing. After delving so deeply into the obscure universe of Balenciaga, one thing becomes clear. Brands may influence you, but the choice to follow their charms or not is yours. And perhaps that's the most important part of this journey, understanding that luxury doesn't control your mind unless you unconsciously relinquish that control. So, stop for a moment and ask yourself, what have you been consuming? What have you been admiring? What, in fact, has shaped how you perceive value, beauty, and power? Because in the end, this whole story isn't just about fashion. It's about you, about your choices, your perceptions, and what you decide to allow to influence your life. Are you choosing consciously? Or are you just following what seems fascinating, even if it hides something disturbing? This reflection may seem uncomfortable, but it is precisely the discomfort that opens the way for true change. And now I ask you, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you continue to passively observe the world of luxury, or will you use this new vision to see beyond the glitz, beyond the aesthetics, beyond the rhetoric? The transformation begins when you decide not to be manipulated and start analyzing each move with a critical, mature, and independent eye. If this content made you think, and I believe it did, take advantage of it and subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stick around. We still have a lot to explore, and you won't want to miss our next dives into the minds, behaviors, and dark underbelly of the narratives that drive the modern world.